The autumn sun cast long shadows across Martinez Auto Repair, where Tom Carter wiped his oil-stained hands on an old rag. At 52, his face showed the weathering of a life lived honestly, lines around warm brown eyes that still held kindness despite the hardships. His hair had gone silver at the temples, and his broad shoulders carried the weight of raising his daughter alone for the past 8 years. Sarah, his 16-year-old, sat at the small desk in the corner, doing homework between answering the phone. She had her mother's gentle smile, though Tom hadn't seen that smile nearly enough lately. Money was tight. It was always tight. The bells above the door chimed, and Tom looked up to see an unfamiliar silver Mercedes pull into the lot. The woman who stepped out wore a tailored cream suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and even from across the shop, Tom could see the designer sunglasses perched on her head. This was Diane Foster, though he didn't know it yet. What he did know was that people like her didn't usually stop at places like his. "Can I help you, ma'am?" Tom called out, setting down his tools. Diane looked around the modest shop with barely concealed disdain. Her heels clicked sharply on the concrete floor. "My car is making a noise. I was on my way to the country club when it started. I suppose you'll have to look at it." Tom nodded patiently. He'd dealt with all kinds in his 30 years as a mechanic. "Let me take a listen." He climbed into the driver's seat, and Sarah watched from the desk as her father carefully started the engine. There it was, a distinct knocking sound that made him wince. This wasn't going to be a quick fix. "Ma'am, I'm afraid it sounds like you've got some serious engine trouble. Could be the bearings or possibly the timing chain. I'd need to get it up on the lift and really look at it properly." Diane's perfectly composed face cracked with irritation. "How long will that take?" "A few hours to diagnose properly. Maybe longer depending on what I find." "A few hours?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "I'm Diane Foster. I run Foster Technologies. My time is worth more than you'll make in a month." Tom felt the familiar ache of being looked down upon, but he kept his voice steady. "I understand, ma'am, but rushing a diagnosis could mean missing something important. Your engine needs proper attention." Sarah stood up from the desk, her young face flushed with anger at how this woman was speaking to her father, but Tom caught her eye and gave a small shake of his head. "Not worth it, sweetheart." Diane pulled out her phone, making calls, her voice growing more agitated with each conversation. Finally, she turned back to Tom. "My assistant says every other reputable shop is booked solid. I have a board meeting I cannot miss tomorrow morning. I can work late tonight," Tom offered quietly. "I'll do everything I can to get you back on the road." She studied him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. Perhaps it was the sincerity in his voice, or maybe she was just out of options. "Fine, but if this takes longer than tonight, I'll be sure everyone knows about this place." Tom simply nodded and got to work. Sarah brought him coffee as the afternoon wore on, and he could see the question in her eyes. "Why do you let people talk to you like that, Dad?" But Tom had learned something over the years, something his own father had taught him in this very shop back when it had been Carter and Son instead of just Carter. You can't control how people treat you, but you can control who you are. And Tom Carter was a man who did honest work, treated people with respect, and raised his daughter to know her worth, even when the bank account said otherwise. As evening fell, Tom discovered the problem was indeed the timing chain, and it had done some damage. Parts would need to be ordered. But with some creative solutions and pieces he had in stock, he could get her running well enough to make it to wherever she needed to go. Around 9 that night, Tom emerged from under the hood, exhausted. Diane had been making calls in the waiting area, and Sarah had long since gone upstairs to their small apartment above the shop. "It's done," Tom said. "I've got you fixed up enough to get where you're going, but you'll need to bring it back next week for a more permanent repair." I wrote down everything on the invoice. Diane stood and walked over, looking at the engine with new eyes. "You actually did it?" "Yes, ma'am." She picked up the invoice, and her eyebrows rose. This is quite reasonable, almost too reasonable for the work involved." Tom shrugged. "I don't believe in overcharging people. The world's hard enough as it is." For the first time since she'd arrived, Diane really looked at him. She saw the tired lines around his eyes, the honest calluses on his hands, the dignity in his posture despite the way she'd spoken to him. "I was rude to you earlier," she said quietly. "Inexcusably rude." "People have bad days," Tom replied simply. "I hope tomorrow's board meeting goes well for you." Diane laughed, and this time it was genuine. "You're a strange man, Tom Carter. Most people would have told me off or done subpar work out of spite. Not how I was raised." She paid the bill, added a generous tip that Tom tried to refuse but she insisted on, and then paused at the door. "That daughter of yours, she was ready to defend you this afternoon. You've raised her well. She's the best thing I ever did," Tom said softly. Diane left and Tom watched the taillights disappear into the night. He locked up, climbed the stairs to the apartment, and found Sarah still awake, reading on the couch. "She was awful to you," Sarah said. "She was stressed," Tom corrected gently. "But yes, she wasn't kind. That's on her, not on us." "Don't you ever get tired of it, Dad? People looking down on us because we're not rich?" Tom sat beside his daughter, feeling every one of his 52 years. "Sweetheart, I get tired. I get frustrated. But being bitter won't change anything. All we can do is be good people, do good work, and trust that it matters." Sarah leaned against his shoulder. "I think it matters. Then that's all I need to know." 3 days later, the bells chimed again, and Tom looked up to see Diane Foster standing in the doorway. But this time, she wasn't alone. She had a young woman with her, maybe mid-20s, sharply dressed. "Mr. Carter," Diane said, and her voice was different, warmer. "I hope you have a moment." "Of course. Is the car giving you trouble already?" "No, the car is fine. I wanted to talk to you about something else." She gestured to the young woman. "This is Jennifer Marsh, my Director of Community Initiatives." Tom wiped his hands, confused. "Nice to meet you, ma'am." Jennifer smiled. "Mr. Carter, Miss Foster told me about her experience here the other night, about your integrity and skill. Foster Technologies is launching a new program to support small businesses in underserved communities. We'd like Martinez Auto Repair to be one of our first partners." Tom blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Diane stepped forward. "I've been thinking a lot about our interaction, about how I treated you and how you responded. It made me realize how disconnected I've become from real people doing real work. This program will provide low-interest loans, business development support, and marketing assistance to businesses like yours." "I don't understand," Tom said slowly. "Why would you do this?" "Because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten," Diane said quietly. "My father started Foster Technologies in a garage much like this one. He was a mechanic too, actually. Worked on computers instead of cars, but the principle was the same. Honest work, fair prices, treating people with dignity. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I became the kind of person who would have looked down on my own father." Tom felt something tighten in his chest. "Ma'am, the loan would be enough to upgrade your equipment, hire an additional mechanic if you wanted, and cover Sarah's college tuition when the time comes." "You remember her name," Tom said, surprised. "Of course I do. I also did some research. I learned about your wife passing away 8 years ago, about you taking over this shop from your father when he got sick, about the Little League team you sponsor every year even though it probably stretches your budget." Diane's voice softened. "You're a good man, Tom Carter. The world needs more good men, and fewer people like I was that day." Sarah had appeared from the back room and Tom glanced at her. In his daughter's eyes he saw hope. Hope for college. Hope for a future that didn't involve constant worry about money. "I don't know what to say," Tom admitted. "Say you'll consider it," Jennifer said, handing him a folder. "Look over the paperwork. Talk it over with your daughter. There's no pressure, but the offer is genuine." After they left, Tom and Sarah sat together in the small office, looking at the papers that promised a different kind of future. Not an easy one. There was still work to be done, still challenges ahead, but different. A little bit easier, maybe. "Dad?" Sarah said quietly. "Is this really happening?" "I think so, sweetheart. Because you fixed her car?" "No," Tom said, understanding it now. "Because we chose to be kind even when someone wasn't kind to us. Because we did good work and asked for a fair price. Because we were ourselves. Sarah hugged him tight. Grandpa would be proud. Tom thought about his father, about all those lessons in dignity and honesty and treating people right. About how those lessons had seemed so impractical when the bills piled up and the customers were few. But maybe, just maybe, they'd been the most practical thing of all. 2 weeks. Later, Tom signed the partnership papers. Within 6 months, Martinez Auto Repair had new equipment and a second mechanic, a young veteran named Marcus who reminded Tom a lot of himself at that age. Sarah got early acceptance to a good state college with the promise that tuition wouldn't be a crushing burden. Diane became an occasional visitor to the shop, sometimes bringing her car in for service, sometimes just stopping by to see how things were going. Tom learned that she'd been divorced 3 times, that her children barely spoke to her, that success had cost her more than she liked to admit. "You know what I envy most?" she asked him one afternoon as he worked on her Mercedes. "That girl of yours lights up when she sees you. My kids look at me like I'm a stranger who occasionally writes checks." Tom straightened up, looking at this powerful woman who seemed somehow smaller than she had that first day. "It's never too late," he said. "Not with the people who matter." "You think so?" "I know so. Takes effort, though. Takes showing up, being honest, being willing to be wrong. Takes being there for the small moments, not just the big ones." Diane smiled sadly. "When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just a mechanic who loves his daughter and tries to do right by people." He paused. "But I learned something from you, too. From me, what could I possibly teach you? That sometimes the help we need comes from unexpected places. That people can change. That one moment of connection can ripple out in ways we never imagined." Tom handed her the keys. "You're all set. No charge this time. Tom, let me do this. You've done more than enough for us. Let me give something back." As Diane drove away that day, Tom stood in the doorway of his shop, feeling the weight of gratitude and possibility. Sarah appeared beside him, slipping her hand into his weathered one. "Dad, thank you. For what, sweetheart? For showing me what really matters. For teaching me that who we are is more important than what we have." Tom squeezed her hand, and in that moment, he understood what his father had been trying to teach him all those years ago in this very spot. Kindness isn't weakness. Integrity isn't impractical. And sometimes, just sometimes, doing the right thing when no one's watching means everything when someone finally does. The autumn sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, and Tom Carter, mechanic, father, good man, locked up his shop for the night and climbed the stairs to the home he'd made, grateful for the journey that had brought him here.